We're going to begin by looking at what we need to highlight from yesterday. So, first of all, highlight conflict number 2, the King's Dream, the title on page 152. Then highlight the third question in the chart. What excuse did the astrologers make? And the answer for that was B. They said no one could answer the king because only gods could tell it, and gods do not live among men. That's true, but there's only one God. Okay, then you also need to highlight the fourth question. How did Daniel respond to hearing the king's decree? And that was choice G. He told the king he would interpret the dream. He then received the interpretation from God in a vision. So those answers obviously for the third and fourth questions were B, G. But if I look above the first question, the answer was D, then F. And then if I skip down to the last three questions, the third to the bottom, what was Daniel's first response? A. And then what was Nebuchadnezzar's attitude? C. And then how did God use King Nebuchadnezzar? E. All right, today we're going to discuss conflict number 3, the king's image. Highlight that title. Daniel and his friends had handled themselves very wisely. Now Daniel's 3 friends would be tested much more severely. King Nebuchadnezzar had acknowledged that Daniel's God was the God of all gods, but he did not worship him as the only true God. He still worshipped other gods and believed that he, as king, should also be worshipped. Sounds like the Pharaoh in Egypt. So we're going to review the story in Daniel chapter 3. So turn in your Bibles to Daniel chapter 3. And the first pencil says, what were the names of Daniel's 3 friends? Well, their common names were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That's how we've memorized their names. But literally, their names are told to us in Daniel 1:7. And Hananiah, that was who was Shadrach. Mishael became Meshach, and Azariah became Abednego. Daniel's name was also changed to a Babylonian name. His name was changed to Belteshazzar, but it didn't stick. For whatever reason, when God records it in His Word, He does record that the 3 friends' names were literally changed, but Daniel's name didn't stick. I'm not sure why. He was still Daniel. I mean, he was Daniel to King Cyrus when at the end of Daniel, toward the end of Daniel's time in the kingdom and in the castle. Okay, we're on the second pencil. Explain the situation that caused them to show that they had great courage to do right. So that's found in Daniel chapter 3, verses 16, 17, and 18. So turning there, it says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. So, the situation is an image of gold was made, and everyone was supposed to bow down and worship it, but they refused to fall down before this image. Third pencil, what punishment was given because of the stand they took? Well, we find that in verses 19 and 20. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That means he was so angry, his face showed how his anger with them, because he thought that he could talk them into doing what everybody else was doing and bow down. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. So in other words, 7 times hotter than what it normally was heated for punishments. Verse 20, and he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. So, that's the third pencil. What was Nebuchadnezzar's attitude toward God at first? So if I go back to verse 15, it'll tell me at first, this is Nebuchadnezzar's attitude. Now, if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made, well. But if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? So his attitude is he was angry that they would even suggest that they didn't have to bow down. And he joked that their God was not going to be able to deliver them from the fiery furnace, nor from what he could do to them. All right, the next pencil says, how did God take care of them through this? And this is found in verses 21 through 27. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, their hats, their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. So clothing and all. So, Nebuchadnezzar's thinking that's just something else to burn. Verse 22, therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So the guards that were meant to cast those guys into the furnace were killed just from the being close to the furnace. They didn't even get in it. Verse 23, and these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, true, O king. Verse 25, he answered and said, lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake, and said, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth, and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire. Verse 27, and the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was an hair of their heads singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. This is amazing. They were not burned at all. Someone appeared with them in the furnace, whom the Babylonians thought looked like a son of the gods. And we know that every time God mentions that being, that it is Jesus Christ in the Old Testament. This was probably Jesus Christ before he became man on earth. So your answer there needs to be highlighted. How did God take care of them? They were not burned. Someone appeared with them in the furnace, whom the Babylonians thought looked like a god, but it was the Son of God, Jesus Christ. All right, last pencil on that section. What was Nebuchadnezzar's attitude toward the true God after they had taken their stand and been delivered from being burned while in the furnace? And that's found in verses 29 and 30. Therefore I make a decree, this is Nebuchadnezzar talking, that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So, the answer to that question, he believed in their God and would not allow anyone to speak against the true God. And that needs to be highlighted as well. So you had 3 things to highlight from today and 3 things to highlight from yesterday. If you don't have those highlighted, please watch the video again and you can get them highlighted this time.